They always thought control meant safety. They believed that keeping a distance protected them, that pulling away first would stop them from being hurt. They convinced themselves that emotions were weakness and attachment was danger. So they built walls instead of relationships. They turned silence into comfort, and they mistook loneliness for peace. But control isn't peace, it's avoidance dressed as strength. And one day, that illusion begins to fall apart, because no matter how hard they try to bury emotion, real love always finds a way to haunt them. It waits quietly inside their chest. It shows up in moments they can't prepare for, in memories they didn't ask to remember. And that's when the breaking point begins. When their control finally turns into emptiness. When their distance becomes their punishment. When they realize the silence they used to enjoy now feels like a cage they built with their own hands. At first, they don't notice it. They tell themselves they're fine, that they needed space, that they're better off alone. They distract themselves with routines, with noise, with people who don't ask too much. They convince themselves that they're healing, but deep down, something feels off. Something feels missing, because the truth is, control without love is hollow. It gives them structure, but no warmth. It gives them freedom, but no purpose. They walk through their days pretending to be unbothered. But at night, when everything is still, the silence they once valued starts to ache. It turns from peace into a reminder, into the sound of what's gone, into the echo of your absence. And that's when they start to feel it. The emptiness they created by pushing away the only person who saw them, the only one who tried to love them through their walls. They remember the moments they dismissed, the times you reached out and they looked away, the nights you cried while they stayed silent. And for the first time, those memories don't make them feel powerful. They make them feel small. They make them realize that control without compassion is just fear, pretending to be strength. They start replaying conversations, wondering how it would have turned out if they had just opened up, if they had just stayed, if they had just said, "I'm scared," instead of "I'm done." But they didn't. And now the control that once made them feel safe has become the reason they're alone. It's the armor that's turned into isolation, the wall that's become a prison because love can't breathe where fear is fed, and they starved it until it died. They used to think they had all the time in the world, that you'd always be there, that no matter how far they pushed, you'd come back, because you always did, you always forgave, you always tried. And they relied on that. It gave them comfort. It made them believe they could keep running without consequence. But this time was different. This time you didn't. In return, this time you found your peace somewhere they couldn't follow. And that's when reality hit. It didn't happen all at once. It came slowly, like water dripping on stone, realization after realization, moment after moment, until one day they woke up and realized the silence wasn't space anymore. It was loss, not distance, but detachment. And the one person they thought would always chase had finally stopped running after them. And in that stillness, they felt something they had never felt before: the weight of regret. Regret is what breaks them. Not your absence, not your silence, but the realization that they caused it, that they created the very emptiness they now fear. And no matter how strong they pretend to be, no matter how calm they look, that weight lives inside them. It lingers in their thoughts. It whispers during the quiet moments. It shows up in every new connection they try to build. Because no one else feels the same. No one else carries the energy you did. No one else sees them the way you did. And every new face only reminds them of the love they lost, the love they destroyed. Not because it wasn't real, but because they weren't ready for real. And that's the cruel irony. They spent their whole life running from vulnerability, and now it's the one thing they crave. They begin to understand what they never did before, that control doesn't protect you from pain. It only delays it. It only keeps you from love until love is gone. They start realizing that pushing people away isn't strength, it's fear in disguise. And they begin to wish they had listened, that they had stayed, that they had fought the urge to run. Because now there's no one chasing them, no one waiting on the other side of silence. And that's the moment control collapses. That's the moment they finally see that power isn't in detachment, it's in connection, it's in honesty. It's in being brave enough to stay when everything inside you wants to leave. They thought protecting their heart would keep them safe, but instead, it made them lonely. It made them cold. And now that they've lost what was real, they finally understand that control without love is nothing but emptiness wearing a mask. You were never trying to take their freedom. You were trying to give them safety. You weren't asking them to lose themselves. You were asking them to let themselves be found, but they couldn't see it. Not then, because fear blinds people. It convinces them that closeness is danger and love is loss. And now, as they sit in the silence they created, they realize too late that love was never their enemy. Fear was, and the distance they built to protect their heart became the very thing that broke it. Because no matter how strong they thought they were, no matter how in control they believed they'd stay, real love has a way of exposing what's real inside you. And when they finally feel the weight of your absence, when they finally understand that you were never trying to hurt them, only heal with them, that's when their breaking point comes. Not in anger, not in loneliness, but in the quiet understanding that the control they worshipped became the reason they lost everything that ever truly mattered. They called it freedom. When they walked away, they told themselves they needed space, that being alone would bring them clarity, that letting go was peace. But what they didn't understand was that peace isn't found in running, it's found in facing. And when you walk away from something real, you don't find freedom. You find silence that doesn't heal. You find quiet that doesn't comfort. You find yourself sitting in a version of peace that feels more like punishment. At first, they convince themselves that they did the right thing. They tell themselves love was too heavy, too intense, too complicated. They distract themselves with new faces, new routines, new distractions. But no matter what they do, nothing feels right, because the illusion of freedom begins to crumble the moment they realize that the absence of chaos isn't the same as the presence of peace, that being alone doesn't heal you when you're still haunted by what you ran from. They thought leaving would make them lighter, that walking away would ease the weight they carried, that solitude would be their strength. But freedom without meaning is emptiness. It's like holding your breath and calling it control. It feels powerful until it starts to suffocate you. They thought avoiding love would protect them, but all it did was expose the truth. They weren't afraid of you. They were afraid of themselves, of how deeply they could feel, of how much they could need someone, of how vulnerable love made them. And so they chose distance, not because they didn't care, but because caring terrified them. They told themselves they'd be fine without you, that they could move on, but deep down, something inside them started to ache. Something started to whisper that maybe, just maybe, the real prison wasn't love, it was avoidance. At first, they feel powerful. They feel untouchable. They tell themselves that they made the right choice. They post pictures pretending to be happy. They fill their days with noise, with company that never feels like connection. They laugh loudly. They stay busy, but the nights always come. The silence always returns. And that's when the truth starts to break through. Because no distraction can silence the sound of regret. No amount of pretending can erase the feeling that they walked away from something pure. They start remembering your voice, your kindness, your patience, and suddenly the solitude that once felt peaceful now feels empty. The quiet that once felt healing now feels haunting. And they realize that the freedom they thought they wanted was just another form of running, another form of denial. Because you can't outrun love, and you can't escape what your heart knows was real. They start noticing the difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude gives peace, loneliness gives ache. Solitude feels like choice. Loneliness feels like consequence. And what they're feeling now is the consequence of mistaking avoidance for independence. They look around and see how they've created distance in every direction, how their world has grown smaller, quieter, colder. They thought leaving love would make them strong, but now it's the absence of love that makes them weak. They feel the emptiness in the spaces where your presence used to live, the silence where your laughter used to fill the air. They see it in the way no one else makes them feel known. No one else makes them feel safe. And they start to understand that what they called chaos was actually connection. What they called control was actually fear. And what they called freedom was actually the beginning of their loneliness. They told themselves that you were too emotional, too much, too deep. But now they see that it wasn't you who was too much. It was them who was too closed, too afraid, too convinced that love was something to survive instead of something to trust. They spent so long building their walls that they forgot what warmth felt like. And now that warmth is gone, now that safety is gone, they find themselves standing in the ruins of everything they destroyed, calling it growth when it's really grief. They replay moments in their mind, the times you tried to reach them, the words you said that they ignored, the softness they mistook for weakness, and it starts to hurt. Not just because they lost you, but because they realized they had everything they ever wanted and didn't know how to hold it. And there's no freedom in that, only remorse. Regret begins quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives slowly. Through the smallest things, a scent that reminds them of you, a song that plays when they least expect it, a line from a conversation that replays when they try to sleep. It's in the silence between distractions. It's in the stillness they used to love. And it starts to burn because the same space that once made them feel powerful now makes them feel hollow. They used to run to silence for safety. Now they run from it for relief. They start to realize that peace without love is just numbness. It's an illusion that fades once you understand that what you really needed wasn't distance, it was connection. And that's the moment everything starts to change. The moment they stop feeling free and start feeling lost. The moment they realize that love wasn't the cage, fear was. They begin to see that love wasn't taking their control, it was giving them purpose. It wasn't trapping them, it was transforming them. It wasn't weakness, it was awakening. And now that they've destroyed it, they finally see it clearly. Because that's what happens when you lose something real. You start to understand its worth when it's too late to hold it. They thought they could leave and come back, that love would wait for them, that the door would always be open. But now the door is closed, not out of anger, but out of growth, out of peace. And when they stand in front of that door and realize it's no longer theirs to open, that's when their illusion of freedom shatters. That's when they understand that walking away didn't set them free. It sentenced them to a life of missing something they'll never find again in anyone else. Because real love doesn't come twice, and the only thing heavier than losing it is realizing you are the reason it's gone. Memory is cruel to the ones who took love for granted. It waits until the noise fades, until the distractions stop, and then it begins to whisper, not with anger, but with truth. It shows them every moment they ignored, every smile they dismissed, every piece of love they broke without care. And at first, they try to fight it. They tell themselves they did what was best. They repeat the same excuses that used to keep them calm. But memory doesn't listen. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't soften for pride. It plays back everything they lost in perfect detail. The sound of your voice, the warmth of your laughter, the look in your eyes when you still believed they'd choose you. And every frame of that memory cuts deeper than silence ever could, because now they're watching the story of a love they destroyed, and they can't change a single scene. They can't rewrite it, they can only feel it. They begin to see how much of you lived in the small things, in the way you said their name, in the patience you gave when they pushed away, in the understanding you offered when they didn't deserve it. And now those moments haunt them, not because they want to remember, but because they can't forget. No matter how hard they try, no matter how many distractions they chase, memory keeps finding them. It finds them in the quiet, in the mornings when they wake up to an empty bed, in the nights when the world feels too still. It finds them in the faces of strangers who remind them of you, in songs that sound too familiar, in places that still carry your presence. And every time it does, it brings the same realization that you were real, that what you gave was real, and that they let it slip through their hands like it meant nothing. When you loved them, they couldn't see it. They thought love was a threat, not a gift. They mistook consistency for control, vulnerability for weakness, and your softness for pressure. They thought you were trying to fix them when all you were trying to do was understand them. And that's the tragedy of the avoidant heart. They destroy what they crave most. They run from what would heal them. And by the time they understand that, love has already turned into memory. A memory that plays over and over, louder each time, because now they're not running anymore. Now they're sitting in the silence they created. And silence has a way of making truth impossible to avoid. It forces them to listen, to see, to feel. And that's when regret begins to take root. Quiet but unrelenting. A slow-burning realization that they pushed away the only person who ever tried to stay. They start to remember the times they made you feel small, the moments they made you question your worth, and every apology they never gave begins to weigh on them. They replay those conversations in their mind, imagining what they could have said differently, what they should have done. But regret doesn't fix what's broken. It only deepens the wound. It reminds them that they had chances, so many chances, and they wasted every one of them trying to protect a version of themselves that wasn't even real. They thought they were in control, but they were being controlled by fear. Fear of losing, fear of needing, fear of feeling, and now that fear has turned into emptiness, into longing, into sleepless nights filled with the memory of you. And the cruelest part is that they finally understand your love when it's no longer theirs to have. It doesn't hit them all at once. It's slow, it's quiet. It creeps in during moments of stillness. They'll hear a song and suddenly remember how you sang along. They'll see something and picture the way you would have smiled. They'll reach for their phone instinctively and then stop, realizing there's no one to call, no one who feels like home anymore. And that realization breaks them. Not dramatically, not loudly, but silently. It cracks something deep inside, because they start to see what love really was, not the words, not the moments, but the presence, the consistency, the safety you offered without needing to be asked. And that's what memory does. It turns love into understanding. It reveals everything they were blind to. And now they're left with the truth that every small moment they took for granted was actually everything they'll ever want again. They'll try to escape it. They'll look for you in other people. They'll search for pieces of you in conversations, in connections, in touches, but no one will feel the same. No one will sound the same. No one will look at them the way you did. And the more they search, the clearer it becomes that what they lost wasn't ordinary. It was once in a lifetime. It was rare, it was real, and it was destroyed by their own hands. And that's when memory stops being a reminder and starts becoming a punishment. Because it's not just about losing you, it's about losing who they were when they were with you. The version of themselves that felt alive, that felt seen, that felt capable of love. And now that version of them exists only in memory too. And that realization is unbearable because they begin to understand that they didn't just destroy love. They destroyed themselves in the process. There comes a night when it all hits them, when every thought, every image, every sound comes crashing down, and they finally break, not because of what you did, but because of what they didn't do. They didn't fight, they didn't stay, they didn't listen. And now the silence screams louder than your words ever could. They reach for the comfort they used to reject and find nothing but air. They want to apologize but don't know where to start. They want to reach out but don't know if you'd even hear them anymore. And in that moment, memory becomes their mirror, showing them not just what they lost, but who they became. A person too afraid to love, too scared to feel, too proud to stay. And now they finally see what real strength would have been, not walking away, but choosing to stay when everything in them wanted to run. And that's their breaking point. The moment when memory turns from warmth to weight, when love turns from comfort to lesson. Because now they know the truth. Love doesn't vanish when it's destroyed. It stays as a memory, as a mirror, as a message that says, you had something real, and you let it go. And they will carry that truth quietly for the rest of their life, pretending to move on, pretending to forget. But deep down, every time they feel lonely, every time they hear something that sounds like your laughter, every time they catch themselves thinking of what could have been, that's love. Reminding them that they didn't lose you by accident, they lost you by choice, and that choice will be the memory that never fades. When they finally realize that real love doesn't return once it's destroyed, it's already too late. Because by the time that truth settles into their heart, you've already grown into someone they can't reach anymore. They used to think love was a revolving door, that no matter how many times they walked out, you'd still be standing there waiting. But real love doesn't work like that. It transforms, it evolves. It turns into wisdom, into boundaries, into a kind of strength that no longer needs to be chased or explained. They used to believe they could always come back when they were ready, that love would forgive them endlessly. But love has a limit, and that limit is reached when it's been broken too many times. They never thought you'd stop trying. They never thought your heart would learn peace without them. And that's their breaking point, when they finally realize that the person they once took for granted no longer belongs to the same version of the story they destroyed. At first, they try to convince themselves that it's not over. They tell themselves it's just space, just time. They repeat the same comforting lie that kept them from changing, that love like yours doesn't go away. But then one day they see it, not in a dramatic moment, but in something simple, a look in your eyes that doesn't carry pain anymore, a calmness in your voice that doesn't tremble when their name is mentioned. And it hits them like a quiet storm, because that's when they understand that you've moved from loving them to learning from them. That the same love they once thought would always be theirs has now become your strength, your peace, your reason for growth. And they can't stand it, because in that moment, they realize that they didn't just lose you. They lost the version of themselves that felt worthy when they were loved by you. They'll try to reach back, not with action, but with regret. They'll send messages that sound like nostalgia. They'll show up when they sense your silence is real. They'll use words like, "I miss you," or "I was thinking about you." But you've already learned that missing isn't the same as meaning. You've learned that love without accountability is manipulation, disguised as memory, and that's what destroys them. Because they expected to find you waiting in the same place they left you, still hoping, still forgiving, still believing. But instead, they find someone who's healed, someone who doesn't respond from pain anymore. There's someone who has accepted the ending without needing closure. And that's what truly breaks them. Because for the first time, they can't access you emotionally. They can't control the narrative, and they can't undo the consequences of their choices. They have to face the truth that real love doesn't circle back. Once it's been destroyed, it transforms into distance that can't be crossed. They begin to remember how it used to feel, how you used to look at them like they were home, how your presence made them feel seen, and that memory starts to turn into ache, because now that warmth belongs to someone else, to your future, to your peace, to the new version of you that no longer waits for what broke you. They'll try to understand where it all went wrong. They'll replay the moments where they could have said something different, done something better, and they'll realize it wasn't one moment that destroyed everything. It was the pattern, the habit of pushing love away, the refusal to open up, the pride that made them choose distance over honesty. And by the time they understand that, it's no longer a lesson they can apply. It's a truth they have to live with, because love doesn't return to where it wasn't valued. It evolves in the hands of the one who learned from it. You were once their comfort, their constant, the person they could count on to stay, no matter how many times they tested your patience. And that was their mistake. They mistook unconditional love for endless availability. They thought your heart was theirs to leave and return to whenever they pleased. And now they realize that love has a breaking point, that even the most patient heart gets tired. And when it does, it doesn't explode. It doesn't seek revenge. It simply becomes still, quiet, free, and that stillness terrifies them. Because it means you've let go. It means you've stopped fighting. It means the chapter has closed without their permission. And that's the kind of ending they never prepared for. Because they always thought love would wait. They never thought it would outgrow them. They start to understand what you meant when you said love isn't a feeling, it's a choice. Because now that they want to choose it, it's no longer available. They thought they could take time to find themselves, to explore, to figure things out. But love doesn't pause for fear. It doesn't freeze while someone decides if it's worth fighting for. Love moves, it flows, it grows in the direction of peace. And by the time they look up, it's already moved on. You've already turned pain into power, tears into wisdom, heartbreak into strength, and they're still standing in the same place where they left you, realizing that love didn't leave them. They left love, and now they can't find their way back, because the door they walked through has been closed by time, by growth, by the version of you that finally chose yourself. It's strange how the same silence that once felt like victory now feels like defeat to them. How the same distance that once made them feel free now feels like loss. They thought they were escaping the chaos, but now they understand that the real chaos is living with regret. That the real pain isn't in losing someone else, it's in losing the chance to love right when it mattered. They watch you from afar, maybe quietly, maybe in secret. They see your peace, your confidence, your light. And though they might never admit it, something inside them breaks every time because they finally see what they destroyed. Not a relationship, not a connection, but real love, the kind that could have lasted, the kind that could have healed them if they had been brave enough to let it. And that's how love transforms, not by returning, but by teaching, not by rekindling, but by reminding. It turns into the kind of wisdom that lives in both hearts forever. In yours as growth and in theirs as grief. You learn to love yourself deeper, to never settle for half-hearted connection again, while they learn what real love costs when it's taken for granted, and that's the ending they never expected. Not dramatic, not loud, just final, quiet, and irreversible. Because love doesn't always end in goodbye. Sometimes it ends in realization, the kind that comes too late, the kind that humbles even the most guarded heart. And that's when they understand they didn't lose love because it ran out. They lost it because love grew without them. It evolved, it transformed, and it became something they'll never touch again. Because by the time they were ready to love you right, you were already gone.